The dark web isn't just a website, it's a doorway, and once you open it, you never know what might step through. I used to think those dark web stories were exaggerated, made up just to scare people, until the night I found myself living inside one. The night I realized someone out there had been watching me far closer than I ever imagined. I never thought a simple message could change everything, until it did. And it left me with one question I still can't answer. What happens when the hunter decides you're the prize? Tonight, we're diving into true disturbing dark web horror stories that actually happened. So stick close and keep watching till the end to find out what happened, before it was too late. But before we start, make sure to subscribe or follow so you never miss any new chilling releases. If you're enjoying the content, hit like, drop a comment, and share this video. Let's see how many of you truly love this kind of episodes. Now here's your challenge. One of the stories you're about to hear might not be real. It could be completely made up, or maybe all of them are true. Watch till the end, try to spot the fake, and leave your guess in the comments. And as for last episode's fake story, they were all true. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And now, let's dive into the darkness together. I'm not the type of person who scares easily. I've always been good with computers. Privacy, security, encryption, all that. A couple of years back, I decided to use my skills to build something small on the dark web. Nothing illegal, nothing flashy. Just a private forum where people could share information without censorship. It felt like a good project at the time. Because it was on the dark web, I was paranoid from the start. I spent weeks buried in blogs, security forums, and obscure guides, tightening every screw I could think of to keep my identity safe. I didn't even have the money for a proper VPS, so I used an old laptop at first. It's just a little forum, I told myself. For a while, it worked. People joined, donations trickled in, and the forum grew faster than I expected. After 5 months, the traffic was so heavy, I had to build a proper PC just to host it. That upgrade felt like a milestone. Clean migration, no downtime, everything locked down. Then, one afternoon, I came home and found the server frozen. No big deal, I thought. Maybe a bug. But when I rebooted, the machine beeped and powered off. Dead. Turned out the RAM was corrupted. The shop swapped it under warranty, and a few hours later, the forum was back online. No harm done. Or so I thought. Fast forward about a year. I got home from work on a warm Friday evening, sat down at my desk, and saw a message in my inbox. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I opened it. My heart just stopped. It had my name, my address, bank details, passwords, private emails, even logs from my other devices. Everything about me. I yanked the Ethernet cable out like it was a snake, killed the Wi-Fi. My phone buzzed with a text. I know everything about you. It came from an anonymous SMS gateway. Before I could react, the phone rang. Don't talk. Just listen, a man's voice said. Calm, flat, like he was reading a grocery list. I know everything about you. I want 2 Bitcoin or things will get worse. I'll text the wallet. Then he hung up. I opened my wallet. I had just enough from forum donations. With shaking hands, I sent the payment. Minutes later, the phone rang again. Thank you for complying. Unfortunately, someone I know really likes you. Click. I tried calling the number back. Disconnected. For hours, I paced my apartment, waiting for the next shoe to drop. At 2 a.m., someone banged on my front door. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept to the window. A car was idling at the curb. A figure stood beside it, watching my building. When they saw me, they slid into the car and drove off. By the time I opened the door, they were gone. But an envelope lay on my doormat. Inside were photos of me asleep in my own bed. My heart nearly stopped again. Not only had they been at my house, they'd been inside. The photos had little red hearts drawn around my face. I didn't sleep. As soon as the sun came up, I went to the police. I hadn't done anything illegal, so I thought they'd help. After hours of explaining, an officer finally told me they had no actionable evidence. Basically, sorry, nothing we can do. I wiped my devices clean, stuffed essentials in a bag, and left. My friend Marcus let me crash at his place. For a day or two, it felt like I was safe. Then another envelope showed up. Same photos, this time at Marcus's house. Marcus was the one who suggested a trap. We filled the bed with pillows to fake a sleeping body, set up a couple of cheap cameras, and barred the windows. We sat in the next room, door cracked just enough to see the hallway. Around 3 a.m., the lock rattled. We tensed. The door opened, slow and deliberate. A shadow slipped past. Marcus and I lunged, slammed the door, and braced it shut with a chair and metal bar. The intruder was trapped. Through the crack, we saw a silhouette pacing, agitated but silent. We called the police, hearts pounding. For a moment, I thought this nightmare might finally end. Then the figure pulled out a gun. They held up a piece of cardboard scrawled with "I love you" in thick marker. Then, without hesitation, they pressed the gun to their head and pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening. When police arrived, Marcus and I were on the floor with our hands up, shouting that the intruder was in the room. They forced the door open, weapons drawn. Paramedics rushed in. We were led outside, shaken and trembling. Hours later, a detective slid photos across the table in the interview room. "Do you know her?" he asked. Her. I didn't recognize the woman. He explained she'd been stalking me for months. She was behind the texts, the calls, the break-ins. In her apartment, they'd found a shrine of me. Pictures at the grocery store, at the gym, everywhere. Her diary detailed plans to drug me, chain me to a bed she'd modified so I couldn't escape. "She wanted you to be her husband," the detective said quietly. "You're lucky to be alive." I've never been back on the dark web since. Even now, years later, I still check every lock twice before bed. Sometimes I wake at night convinced I hear a door creak or a floorboard groan, and my blood runs cold. When this event took place, I was a naive 20-year-old, completely immersed in online gaming. My laptop had broken, so I used my older brother's computer without asking for permission. While browsing for games, I came across a website that caught my attention with its appealing design. This was before I ever used social media platforms like Facebook, and many gaming websites were riddled with bugs and questionable security measures. I never gave it much thought, but I now know that visiting unknown sites could expose your computer to viruses and other dangers. At the time, however, I was too careless to worry about it. One afternoon, I got bored and decided to use my brother's computer again. I typed "cool games" into the search bar, hoping to find something fresh to play. Most of the links led to familiar websites, but then, a strange pop-up appeared in the corner of the screen, displaying the words "Death Games." It seemed like just another ad, but for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was different from the usual pop-ups. Curiosity got the best of me, so I clicked it. The screen initially went blank, but soon enough, words appeared. "Hello? Do you want to watch someone die?" Click the button to proceed. The text was in bright red, dripping down like blood. It looked cheesy, but still, something about it intrigued me. I stared at the blinking button for a moment before it changed again, reading, "What's the matter? Scared? It's just a game. Click now and keep going." After thinking it over for a second, I shrugged and clicked yes, expecting some absurd game to load. What I saw next was nothing like what I expected. The animation was crude, showing 3 characters. 2 were men, looking like cartoonish thieves, while the third, a woman, appeared terrified and tied to a chair. The animation was poorly done, but it felt unsettling, especially when one of the men locked eyes with me and gave a creepy smile. He spoke, "Do you want to see her die?" Then, 2 buttons appeared, yes and no. I hesitated for a moment, but clicked yes without thinking much about it. The man put on a butcher's apron and appeared next to the woman, who was now lying on an operating table. What happened next was disturbing. The man used a hacksaw to begin cutting into the woman's body, and her screams sounded too realistic for an animation. I felt a chill as I realized how well the sound effects were done, making the scene feel almost too real. I tried to laugh it off, but it felt wrong and I couldn't look away. Then, the next scene started. This time, the two men were in scuba gear, and their victim was a man dressed in a suit. The man was dragged toward a large body of water, screaming and begging for mercy. The entire scene played out with incredibly detailed sound effects. His screams, the splashes, and the eerie silence afterward. Eventually, the man was dragged under by something large, and the animation showed him without his arms, as if they had been torn off. A massive creature, perhaps an alligator, was responsible for pulling him away. I felt sick and repulsed. This wasn't fun anymore. It had become too dark, too real. I was desperate to leave, but then the screen shifted again. The two men were no longer animated. They were real people, standing in a grim, dimly lit room. The body of a dismembered woman lay nearby, and one of the men was holding a piece of clothing that seemed to belong to her. The distorted voice returned. "Wasn't that enjoyable? You wanted to see more, and we gave you what you wanted. But now it's your turn. Don't leave. The fun will end if you do." The screen presented 3 new options. Yes, I want to experience it. No, I don't want to experience it. And I want to meet you. Panic set in. I quickly clicked no and tried to exit the site, but nothing happened. The screen changed again. "You clicked yes before. Don't pretend you didn't want to see more. You've seen what we can do, so don't back out now." I began to hyperventilate. My heartbeat was racing as I kept clicking no in desperation. Finally, the page closed, and I could breathe again. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, and I was terrified. I immediately checked my browser history, but the website had vanished without a trace. A few minutes later, my brother came home. I was still in shock, and he asked what I had been doing. I explained everything, and he immediately took the computer from me. After doing something I didn't understand, he shut it down and scolded me for using his computer without asking. He explained that what I had seen wasn't a regular website, but part of something much darker. The dark web. My brother, who studied computer science, had the knowledge to access it. He told me that he had blocked the website with a code, and that he needed to check the computer for any signs of compromise. I was still shaken and asked if everything I saw was real. He confirmed it was, explaining that those behind the content were very dangerous. I suggested we contact the authorities, but he urged me not to. He said we'd be putting ourselves in serious danger if we did. That terrified me even more. The next day I asked him about it again, and he reassured me that everything was under control. I never learned exactly what he did or who he contacted, but I've never forgotten that night. If you're reading this, you're probably familiar with the term dark web. But what most people don't understand is that it's not just an area of the internet for illicit activities, or where one might find the shocking and strange. The dark web is a place filled with things that defy understanding. Things that, once discovered, are hard to erase from your mind. My friend Max, the name changed for his privacy, and I weren't searching for the usual disturbing content. The kind of dark things you hear about. Unusual videos or eerie images that disturb the mind. We weren't looking for those deep web mysteries that some say capture the worst parts of human nature. What we wanted, however, was knowledge. We were searching for hidden truths, answers that had been deliberately kept from the public, things that no one was meant to uncover. We were hungry to learn more about the world we lived in, and to find proof that there was more to this existence than meets the eye. For months, we scoured encrypted websites and obscure forums, delving deeper into the labyrinth of the dark web. And one fateful night, we stumbled across something that would change everything. It was a forum called Occult Knowledge, and within it were discussions about ancient wisdom, mystical practices, and rituals that had been kept in the shadows for centuries. The more we read, the more intrigued we became by the forbidden topics: witchcraft, spiritual rituals, and sacred rites that had been hidden from public view. And then we discovered a post that stood out from the rest. It was titled, "The Seeker's Right." This post detailed a ritual, one that supposedly allowed a person to summon a powerful entity, one that would show them a level of knowledge beyond human comprehension. But the warning was clear. Once you saw the truth, it would never leave you. The visions would haunt you forever. At first, we laughed it off. It sounded too outlandish, like some sort of tall tale or elaborate hoax. Sure, we believed in the supernatural to some degree, but this? It seemed like nothing more than a story. But as we continued reading, something about it felt genuine. And then we listened to an audio file attached to the post. The voice wasn't human at first, foreign, guttural, and strange. But then, the voice shifted into English, and the words it spoke sent chills down our spines. Your mind will never grasp what is beyond. Remember 2033, when the truth will be revealed. That was the turning point. I don't know why, but we decided that we had to see for ourselves if the ritual was real. We had to test it. We gathered the necessary items: candles, a symbol drawn in red ink, verses to recite, and most importantly, a small amount of blood. According to the ritual, one participant had to offer blood. A coin toss determined who would be the one to bleed, and, in the end, Max was the one who had to cut his palm. There was a moment of hesitation, but we moved forward. The ritual had to take place exactly at 3:15 a.m. We made sure everything was prepared. As the clock ticked toward the critical time, the room grew colder, and a strange sense of anticipation filled the air. When the clock finally struck 3:15, we lit the candle and began the chant. Max held his hand over the flame, and with a quick motion, cut his palm. The blood dripped down, soaking into the flame and snuffing it out. For a few moments, nothing happened. The room was silent. We waited, but all that greeted us was the smell of melted wax and the feeling of disappointment. We thought that maybe the whole thing was just a hoax, a trick to scare the gullible. We went to bed, hoping to forget about it. But then, as I lay there in the darkness, I heard it, the sound. It was unlike anything I could describe, a sound that seemed to echo from someplace deep within the earth. I opened my eyes and froze. Max was sitting up on the couch, his body stiff. His eyes were rolled back into his head, and his mouth hung open as if he were gasping for air. I rushed to him, but as soon as I touched his shoulder, I pulled back in horror. His skin was burning hot, his body trembling violently. Sweat dripped from his face as his body convulsed. Was this some sort of medical emergency? I didn't know what to do. I reached for my phone, but before I could call for help, everything stopped. Max's body went completely still, and his eyes locked onto mine. And then, in a voice that was no longer his, a voice filled with an unsettling calm, the same words from the audio file echoed through the room. Your mind will never grasp what is beyond. Remember 2033, when the truth will be revealed. I was paralyzed with fear. Before I could react, Max collapsed to the floor. I rushed to his side, but before I could check for a pulse, he suddenly shot upright again. His body shook uncontrollably as he screamed, a scream full of terror and confusion. His eyes were wide, filled with an emotion I couldn't place. He looked around the room, his face pale with fear. I tried to calm him, to ask him what was happening, but he couldn't speak. His eyes were wide with terror, and I knew, deep down, that whatever had happened was tied to the ritual we had performed. I didn't understand what he had seen, but I could feel it in the air. A shift, something unexplainable. I called for medical help, but when the paramedics arrived, they found nothing physically wrong with him. They assumed it was some sort of panic attack or mental breakdown. I didn't tell them about the ritual. I couldn't. They wouldn't understand. A week later, I received a call that I never expected. Max was gone. He had taken his own life, hanging from the ceiling in his apartment. The image of his lifeless body is forever burned into my memory. I can still see his eyes, those eyes full of fear, haunting me, even now. I don't know what he saw that night, but whatever it was too much for him to bear. The words, "Remember 2033" ring in my head every day. like a clock counting down to something inevitable. I live with that date in my mind now, dreading what will happen when 2033 finally arrives. What was Max shown that night? What did the ritual reveal that changed him so profoundly? So, if you ever find yourself considering exploring the dark web, let my experience serve as a warning. Some things are better left untouched. Some knowledge is better left unknown. Trust me, it's not worth the cost. If you've made it to the end of this video, let me know in the comments which story creeped you out the most, and if you could survive only one of them, which one would it be? Don't forget to drop your guess. Which story do you think was the fake one? Also, if you enjoyed the episode, hit super thanks if you're on YouTube, or send us some stars if you're on Facebook to show some love and make your comments stand out. Want to go next level? Get early access to upcoming episodes, exclusive members-only content, and much more by joining our YouTube membership or becoming a Patreon supporter. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's waiting there for you. Don't forget to like, share, and catch up on our previous episodes. And now, stay tuned for the next horror episode.